Yes, we are live. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Carvan. This is Ishan Sharma. And this evening, I have a very special guest, somebody who is an amazing teacher. And I had the honor of listening to him offline in my college when I was in my second year, Professor Shalin Jain. Professor Shalin Jain is a historian of medieval Indian history at University and early modern South Asia at University of Delhi, and he's presently working in Delhi University as professor. His research and teaching interests include a vast range of themes, including the social history of Jain community, religious thought and practices, gender and society, identity formation, environment and society, also society and popular culture and resistance. His recent monograph, Identity, Community and State, the Jains and Under the Mughals, had been published from Primus Books, and he has published several research papers in journals such as Indian Historical Review, Studies in History, Social Scientists, etc. And apart from being a two-time winner of the Professor J.S. Agarwal Award for Best Research Paper in Medieval Indian History by the Indian History Congress in 2004 and 2013, he has also been a recipient of the UGC Raman Fellowship Award for Post Doctoral Research in the United States of America from 13 to 14, and honorary fellowship at the Center for South Asia at University of Wisconsin Madison, USA in 2013. So today, Professor Jain is going to talk about merchants and state in Mughal India. And without further ado, I formally invite and welcome Professor Jain, and I really thank him for accepting our invitation to deliver this lecture this evening. Over to you, Professor, and thank you so much for accepting the invitation.
Thank you, Ishan, for your kind words. And I would really like to congratulate the team Karwa for this successful initiative that you have taken for. And without taking much time, I would just start with today's theme. This theme is too broad, right? So I'm not sure whether I would be able to cover up each and every aspect of it, but whatsoever limited time that we have, I would just try to fix in within that frame about the merchants and something that usually we don't talk about and within this limited time, I would be talking about the social world of the Indian merchants and also some aspects that are very much, I would say, some recent forays that have been made into working of the merchants and cosmopolitanism, or how important the merchants' role as mediators in the connected histories. I would just like to touch upon those aspects as well as. Thank you again. So, stretching from Africa and the Middle East to Southeast Asia and China, and from Europe to Americas, the evolution of the world of commerce happened simultaneously alongside the rise of mighty kingdoms, the birth of religions, and social formations. However, the pre-colonial trading world of South Asia is often treated as a secondary and subservient phenomena in which merchants specialized in purely local trade of agrarian goods and handicrafts until European trading companies created a world system of trade. Against such an ahistorical view of pre-colonial localized commerce, we require to historically locate the integrated role of commerce and merchants in South Asian history as done by recent scholarship. The merchants across time and space were not tied to the idea of political frontiers. They worked with the state systems, but their networks and interests transcended the geographical and the imperial boundaries. What is required is to accord historical agency to the merchants and their communities to examine the forms of commercial interconnections, the knowledge systems, and their negotiations with the local politics as they responded to the larger global movements. Merchants were important actors in the intense circulation and exchange of economic, political, social, and cultural life of early modern South Asia, and they brought societies around them into interdependent relationships. It has been noticed that during the early medieval period, apart from the big individual merchants, Large trading guilds and companies were established to handle growing volumes of commodities and requirement of finances. Thus, the trading world of the medieval period was dominated by numerous business communities, both small and big. It is not possible to take a detailed analysis of all of them, but I shall do talk about the major business communities who were actively engaged in trading in medieval India. Here, one could take the period roughly from 1500 to 1800 as a witness to the rise of the complex merchant networks and the trading relations. First of all, I will like to discuss the major characteristics of this trade before delving into the broader world of the merchants. The geography of the trading networks and the trade routes was closely related to the commodities and the communities of trade. These trade networks were in the hands of the commercial magnates, traders, and financiers, whose trading activities were geared both to the movement of the bulk commodities within the countryside as well as to cater to the demands of the luxury goods required by the nobility living in the big cities. Highly specialized business communities had emerged by now. There were different groups of merchants dealing in specific commodities and regions. There were some groups who dealt in trading between hinterlands and town, while some other as big merchants in town. Still, other groups were involved in long distance trade over land or seas. The trade in foodstuffs and a wide range of the textile products were the most important components of inter-regional trade during this period. The bulk commodities included food grains, oil, ghee, pulses, etc., with some regions having a surplus and others a deficit. Thus, rice and sugar surplus in Bengal and Bihar were carried by ships to Malabar and Gujarat. Bengal exported sugar, rice, as well as delicate muslin and silk. The coast of Coromandel became a center of textile production, doing brisk trade with Gujarat, both along the coast and across the Deccan. Gujarat was the entry point of goods coming from Western Asia and beyond. It exported fine textiles and silks to North India, particularly the Patola silk, while receiving food grains and silk from Bengal, and also imported pepper from Malabar. North India imported luxury items and also exported indigo and food grains. Lahore was another center of handicraft production. It was also the distribution center for the luxury products of Kashmiri shawls and carpets. The products of Punjab and Sindh moved down the river Indus. It had close trade links with Kabul and Kandahar on one hand and Delhi to Agra on the other. There was a well-organized trade network in the semi-luxury and luxury good, with Agra and Burhanpur being the two nodal points in northern India. Later in the 18th century, with the decline of Agra, Banaras emerged as one of the nodal points. Lahore had the advantage of sending goods down the river Indus, just as Delhi and Agra were connected by Yamuna. India had been an entrepot of external trade with West Asia, extending through it to Mediterranean world and to the Central Asia, Southeast Asia, and China, both by overseas and overland land routes. The overland land routes lay through the Bolan Pass to Herat and through the Khyber Pass to Bukhara and Samarkand, and also by the Kashmir routes to Yarkand. Since antiquity, Indian merchants were the masters of the sea-borne trade of Europe, Asia, and Africa. Many foreign travelers give accounts of India's brisk trade during the medieval period. Take, for example, medieval Indian Arab traveler Ibn Battuta, who found the great cities with rich markets in the north and south. From the detailed narrative of Ibn Battuta, it appears that the western coast of India was studded with a large number of seaports, excellent harbors, and extensive trade. Among these ports, Diu, Goa, Calicut, Cochin, and Ceylon gained more prominence. The highly profitable direct trade between Gujarat and Malabar was almost completely monopolized by the Malabari merchants. India's overseas trade steadily expanded after the arrival of the Portuguese at the end of the 15th century. They established their dominance over the overseas trade and monopolized certain articles of trades for themselves and excluded the Moors from trade as far as possible. The Asian traders, conscious of the Portuguese domination of the seas, had to obtain from the Portuguese some passes known as the cartes, for the safe passage of their ships. Between the mid of the 16th to the mid of the 18th century, India's overseas trade further developed both in terms of the tonnage of the goods carried as also expansion into the new areas. Another important factor in the growth of trade was the rise of the three powerful empires in Asia, the Ottomans, the Safavids, and the Mughals. These empires not only provided for law and order and conditions under which the trade and commerce and manufacture could grow, but also aided the process of urbanization and monetization of their economies. It is wrong to consider that since the Mughals came from landlocked Central Asia, they were indifferent to trade. Recent research shows that since Central Asian states were located in the steppe lands with limited land for agriculture, they were more they were even more conscious of the importance of the roads east to west and south to north, which crisscrossed their lands and upon which the cargoes moved. The control of roads in order to tax the custom was thus an important part of Timur's empire building. The political career of Mughal dynasty began from Central Asia. The successive emperors were conscious of the economic and the strategic value of such overland commercial arteries. Babur, in his autobiography, relates a story of his father, Umar Sheikh, who, as a minor Timurid prince, ruled over the small state in Fargana Valley. According to Babur, during his father's reign, a caravan once passed through his territories on its way to China and was trapped in a snowstorm, resulting in deaths of the merchant. Omar Sheikh is then said to have ordered the goods of the dead men to be stored until relatives could claim them. Babur explains his father's action by saying that it was motivated by his sense of justice. What he fails to mention is that these merchants were traveling along the principal overland route, so the so-called Silk Route linking the Middle East and Uzbek Turan with China, which ran through the Fargana Valley. Omar Sheikh had good practical reasons for his considerate treatment of these unlucky men, apart from his concern for his reputation as a just sultan, a traditional legitimizing characteristic of the Islamic rulers, for custom duties undoubtedly generated a major portion of his small state's revenue. They endeavored to maintain all such travel routes in a state of running efficiency because these channels acted as conduits for the deliveries of not only the strategic goods such as horses and bullion, but also the mobility and circulation of human capital of Central and Western Asian courts in form of nobility and soldiers on whom the initial Mughals relied on. The Mughal attempt to conquer Gujarat, Bengal, and Sindh, three commercial regions of the country, and their attempts to keep their control over Kabul and Kandahar, two principal overland trade marts, is comparable to Timur's attempt to control the important Central Asian trade routes. The measure that the Mughals took to stimulate trade were variants of orthodox economic policies that were norms in early modern Islamic world. It was usual for the ideas to be transmitted in standardized form of mirror for princes literature, often contained in Nasihat-namas, literally the letters of advice. The economic theory was relatively simple. Monarchs were enjoined to create an infrastructure of roads, bridges, and caravanserais, and to protect travelers and merchants. The good horses were imported to Mughal state from Arabia, Iran, Turan, Turkey, Turkestan, Badakshana, Shirvan, Tibet, Kashmir, and other countries. Kabul and Kandahar were the major entrepôts on the land routes in Mughal India for the horse traders. Domestic production of gold and silver was very limited in Hindustan at that time, and therefore it was extremely critical for any state to work towards the promotion of international trade so that India could maintain its traditionally favorable position in the global commodity flows and consequently attract inflows of gold and silver against its robust portfolio of tradable commodities. So the monetization of the agrarian surplus and the trade-induced exchange economy came to be effectively hinged on available bullion flows on the back of the robust trade. It was by the time of the great Mughal Emperor Akbar that a paradigm change came in the management and governance of the commerce and trade. The trading sessions conducted by Akbar indicates his personal outlook towards trade. The mercantile people eagerly looked forward to attending this event and would lay out articles from all countries. These sessions were attended by the ladies of the harem as well as emperor, who would personally visit the kiosk set up in the pavilion and converse with the assembled traders. Apart from catering to the concerns of the domestic mercantile constituents, Akbar also endeavored to advertise his resoluteness towards encouraging commerce by making references to the state of affairs along the trade routes in his correspondences with foreign Muslim potentates. In one such correspondence with Abdullah Khan Uzbek, Akbar mentioned the political situation alongside the trade routes passing by Kandahar. His measures were further augmented by Jahangir, who was equally keen on promoting overland trade. One of his specific measures in this direction was the decision to repeal dues on several commodities in the region of Kabul at a great loss to the state checker. A major motivation for this concession was probably a desire to expand trade with Iran and Turan. Continuing his father's engagement with the Northwest, Shah Jahan also sanctioned a series of measures along the Khyber route to promote commerce. As part of the plan to invigorate commerce along that route, bridges and caravanserais were constructed. Due to the activities of the various European trading companies and their domination of the Indian Ocean, there was general belief that Indian traders and Indian shipping had largely been displaced from the seas during the 17th and the 18th centuries. But now this theory has been largely discarded as the result of the recent research shows that far from ousting the Indian traders from the overseas trade, the share of the foreign company in the various regions of India, especially Gujarat, Coromandel, or Bengal, remained a fraction of the trade. The major business communities of India during the medieval period primarily comprised of the Baniyas, Khatris, Multhanis, Chettiars, Komatis, and importantly, the Banjaras. Apart from them, the commercial landscape also witnessed active participation of the Arabs, Jews, Syrian Christians, and the Armenian merchants. The spread of merchants in different areas shows that a few groups were more dominant in some regions. Baniyas, Bohras, and Parsis in Gujarat, Hindu and Jain Marwadis in Rajasthan, Khatris in Punjab and North India, Chettiars and Komatis on the eastern coast, Muslim merchants in Gujarat, Deccan, and Bengal were a few such important groups. It is possible that a sense of solidarity among members of a subcaste may have helped in maintaining its prosperity. There were professional merchants in Mughal India who invested in the trading activities with the high entrepreneurial skill and organizing capacity. The backbone of India's seaborne trade was provided by the ship owners and operators whose primary activity was long distance and coastal trade. The ship owners fell into several categories. At one end were the magnates who owned a fleet of ships which were based on one big entrepôt port such as Surat or Masulipatnam, or a cluster of ports such as in south and central Coromandel or Bengal and Orissa. Take for example figures like Abdul Ghaffur of Surat, Mir Kamaluddin of Masulipatnam, and Astrappa Chetty of Pullikat. Abdul Ghaffar was the largest merchant of the seas during the latter part of the 17th and early decades of the 18th century. He is said to have owned 20 ships with a total capacity of well over 5,000 tons. Thus, he could easily challenge comparison with any of the European concerns at Surat. A second category of overseas merchants, who considerably larger than the first, were those who did not own ships but hired space on ships of others for their own trade and the trade of others. The bulk of India's overseas merchants during the period belonged to this category. The number of ocean-going ships in Surat in 1650 was nearly 50. Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan ordered in 1650 that 6 to 8 well-built ships be built every year. However, at the turn of the 17th century, Surat alone had 112 sea-going vessels. The third category of overseas merchants were the kings, princes, and other members of the royal family, administrators and military officials, and nobles who took to trade. Besides the Mughals, there were officials from the states of Bijapur and Golconda and from the smaller states of south like Thanjavur and Madurai. The rulers of Malabar states had a tradition of engaging themselves in trade, but most of them used established merchants for pursuing their trade. In addition to these sections, there was a vast group of merchants who operated on a large scale in the import and export of commodities. They purchased in bulk from ships, sometimes contracting for an entire shipload. They had their own warehouses for storing goods to be sold. They were bulk buyers of commodities brought by European traders, such as spices, copper, broadcloth, etc. Thus, Virjivora of Surat was a large-scale importer of pepper from Malabar and Kanara. Similarly, Ahmad Chalabi of Surat, Malai Chetti Malai Chetti, Kasi Viranna, and Sanaka Rama of southern Coromandel. They were masters of extensive commercial empires. These merchants were comparable to European merchant princes in wealth and power. Even the English, Dutch, and Portuguese had their agents in hinterland markets to dispose of their purchases. For example, Jadu was one of the Jain broker of Surat who was hired by the English as their business agent. He is first recorded as working for Captain William Hawkins in 1608. During 1616 to 1617, he worked for Sir Thomas Roe as a broker and as a linguist. And during the subsequent years until 1632, he seems to have traveled to Agra, Burhanpur, and Ahmedabad for the English. He was particularly useful for liaising with the imperial court of Agra and seems to have worked for the English for close to a half century. Mughal India had a very large mercantile class, the bulk of it composed of castes or endogamous communities, which had been so marked a feature of Indian society. Here we require to understand the work culture of these communities. The Banjaras combined pastoralism and the carrying trade. Their role in Indian agrarian commerce was extremely important. The basis for the trade and indeed for the existence of the Banjaras lay in the conditions of the inland transport. Goods were carried on boats and carts and by camels and bullocks. They had to move in large groups for safety and were kept together by a strong clan ties and subordination to the head. Mughal Emperor Jahangir recorded in his memoir that the Banjaras are a fixed class of people who possess 1,000 oxen or more or less varying in number. They bring grain from the villages to the town and also accompany the army. With an army, there may be 100,000 oxen or more. Peter Mundy, an English traveler, calls the moving assemblage of Banjaras a tanda. Not all Banjaras were Hindus. Muslims also constituted an important segment of the Banjaras in northern India. Although some Banjara communities were traditionally associated with trade in certain commodities, like the Labanas with salt and the Mukheris with wood and timber. It is clear that most of them had no inhibitions about carrying anything that yielded a profit. Among the traditional Vaishya communities, the subcaste grouped under the name Banya were prominent. They belonged to various castes and subcastes specific to different regions and with certain amount of mobility. These Vaishya origin Banyas were spread over most of the northern and western part of India, where they dominated the commercial world. Only in Punjab proper, did the rival caste of Khatris kept them at bay, and they did not penetrate in southern India. Excuse me. The Khatris were a vigorous urban community engaged in trading activity not only in Punjab but also in Afghanistan and Central Asia. The subcaste of Baniyas were defined by the endogamy and restrictions on dining with members of different subcastes as observed by European traveler J. Ovington. Ovington spoke of 24 subcastes, but the more traditional figure was 84 as given by Abul Fazl. Mirate Ahmadi and many other sources gives us the names of 84 subcastes. However, this is typical stereotype as the Baniya subcastes were far more numerous than 84, and over a period of time, there was considerable movement of these subcastes. Take, for example, the Agrawals, widely spread in different parts of the country, said to have their originated from Agroha in Haryana, and the Oswal, with even larger spread, they originated from Osia in Marwar. Some of the Baniya families remembered the original seats of their families. For example, Banarsidas in his Ardh Kathanak says, Nagar Agara mein base Jain Dharam Shrimal, Banarsi Beholia Adhyatmi Risal. I now live in Agra and I am, let me repeat, a Jain of Shrimal clan, Banarsi Beholia by name, Beholia was his Gotra, and an Adhyatmi by conviction. There is no doubt that in South India, the Komatis in Andhra Pradesh and the Chettiyars of the Tamil country were the most important trading communities. They pervaded the whole of their native region and were also found operating in the neighboring areas. On the Kerala coast, Moplas, who were mixed Muslims of Arab and local descents, were important in trading, especially in inland trade. To some extent, the local Syrian Christians also were engaged in trading activities. The emergence of Marwadis, a major group of Baniya subcaste, traced their origin to Marwad in Rajasthan. Of them, the Oswals were widely spread in different parts. Banarsidas of Ardh Kathanak not only mentions them in the Mughal imperial city of Agra, but also tells us that even in the small city like Fatehpur, west of Allahabad, during around 1598, there was a lot of inhabitation of Oswals there. Shantidas Johri, the great merchant of Ahmedabad and jeweler to Emperor Shah Jahan, was also an Oswal. There was, first of all, no bar to the members of the different subcaste of Baniyas forming close business relations. Thus, Khadak Sen, father of Banarsidas, was a Shrimal and a Jain, had partnership with Ramdas and Agrawal and worshipper of Shiva for conducting jewel trade at Jaunpur. Khadak Sen's son Banarsidas had a partnership in Agra with Dharamdas and Oswal. There was a larger sense of fraternity among the Baniyas, enabling them to join together in commercial enterprises, irrespective of the sect or subsect. Another important factor for their success surely lay in the training they received from early childhood in arithmetic, accountancy, and the methods of business. It is possible that a sense of solidarity among the members of subcaste may have helped in maintaining its prosperity, whereas another similar group might decline for lack of it. The subcaste identity existed alongside a very real sense of oneness of the entire Baniya caste. There was a larger sense of fraternity among Baniyas, enabling them to join together in commercial enterprises, irrespective of sect or subsect. In the same spirit, certain codes had been developed to conduct their collective activities in case of emergencies. I shall be returning back to this idea of merchant collectivities, particularly when I would be discussing about the merchant forms of resistance. The Armenian merchant communities engaged themselves in international and intercontinental trade in Eurasian continuum. They ventured out of the homeland to different parts of Asia and Europe. The Armenian networks extended over vast geographical areas, stretching from Bengal to Delhi, Agra, and even to Surat, or from Surat to Red Sea and the Persian Gulf ports. The Armenians were active in the Bengal trade from at least the late 16th and early 17th century. The most striking feature about them was that if there was any possibility of profit in trade, they would even go to the remote places and deal in any commodity, unlike many other trading groups. Their business enterprises was based on family kinship and trusted fellow countrymen. The Armenians succeeded primarily because they were able to create networks of trust, shared information, and mutual support based upon the fact that they were a distinctive ethnic and religious minority. At the same time, the Armenians had a high level of awareness of the international scene and the expertise to link up local and regional markets to intra-Asian markets. This description shows that prior to the development of formal commercial institutions, merchants used informal relationships between relatives to organize themselves as castes, thereby reducing the cost and uncertainty in transmission of knowledge, money, and goods between producers, merchants, and the consumers. It is particularly significant that many merchants themselves identified these ties as the basis of their commercial activities and their firms. An example of it can be Hiranand Mukim, a leading commercial figure of imperial Agra, and Oswal Shwetambar Jain. In 1610, Hiranand invited Emperor Jahangir to his house and gifted him many precious items and organized a lavish dinner. Hiranand had inter-regional commercial cum social linkages that is reflected in his family ties with Hemraj of Patna, who was married to his niece. Another leading Mothia family of Agra, one of the wealthiest Shrimal family, had a stronghold over North Indian trade through his family networks. Bandi Das, another leading jeweler of Agra, was husband of younger sister of Banarsi Das. The merchants of Agra regularly visited Patna and had business stakes there. The journey between Agra and Patna was safe on the regular routes. A major example of Jain presence in Agra in particular and North India in general comes out from Ardhkathanak. Unstable by nature, Banarsi Das repeatedly failed in his familial business, but he could survive his failure solely due to his friendships, familial, and community bonds. The experiences of Banarsidas underlines the fact that the Jain community at Agra, for all practical purposes, formed a town-based close-knit nexus, as most of the members of the community were related to each other. Throughout the 17th century, the distinguished Jain traders of Agra engaged in trade of precious trade. Banarsidas commented in Ardhkathanak, Banarsi kare bichar, bhala jawahar ka vyapar. Business settlements or breaking up of partnerships within the mercantile community, and particularly the Jains, were usually fair. Banarsi Das broke his partnership with Dharam Das after settling the accounts with his brother Jassu Shah and similarly with his friend Narottam. But this honesty was limited to the kinship and community level only. Even the powerful and wealthy persons like Sahu Sabal Singh Mothia, brother of Banarsi's partner Tara Chand Mothia, could be prevailed upon by kinship pressures to fulfill the promises and settle the accounts. Through the 16th, 18th centuries, Hindu and Jain Banyas, consisting of numerous exogamous groups, played a central role in the commercial world of Gujarat. Their influence depended on their networks based on kinship caste, which stretched all over India and beyond. Furthermore, they owed their prominence to their commercial engagement with the Mughal princes and later with the British rulers. The noblemen heavily relied on finances from these prominent Gujarati capitalists. The medieval Indian merchants were intricately connected to family and community sources of support. This is in contrast to the rugged, individualistic, and self-made entrepreneur stereotype in the Western business literature. The spread of such entrepreneurial spirit across the regional borders ensured a synthesis, one that emerges and extends the historical nexus of cultural identity and trade in interesting ways. One of the most important aspects demonstrated by the trading communities was that kinship ties linked many Indian merchants both within the city and between the city and other Indian merchants in the Caspian ports and northern Iran. One finds presence of numerous Multani firms in Bukhara, Samarkand, and in the Iranian city of Isfahan. By 1660s, there were more than 20,000 Multani merchants, apart from the Bania merchants, just in Iran. These Multani merchants included both Muslims and Bania merchants. One of the most leading Multani merchant in Iran was Janab Darya Khan Multani. These Indian merchants not only brought with them commodities of trade, but very importantly, they were also the active mediators of knowledge about money lending techniques and skills otherwise deficit in Central Asia and Iranian society. See here, the idea, the larger idea that I just want to communicate is that we need to look and understand merchants not only trading in the commodities, but these merchants, they were also, as they were circulating very widely transregionally across, they were also one of the, I would say, the vectors who were also circulating along with them the ideas. Fine. They were transferring with them certain techniques of trade as well as, and many of them also moved along and imparted knowledge systems as well as. In the port city of Surat, the organizational pattern of the commercial activities suggests a guild or Mahajan-like organization. Most of the disputes referred to in the English factory records were resolved by the committees having representation from the merchant community as well. The regular reference to the names like Virji Vora, Hari Vaisya, and Haji Muhammad Zahid Beg indicates that the community of merchants had some kind of organization, and these were recognized leaders. In all probability, the merchant community was organized through the institution of Mahajan. Generally, the local governors had harmonious relations with the merchant community to ensure their own tenure and prosperity. An interesting aspect of the Surat business transaction has been recorded by European travelers, say, like by Thévenot, John Fryer, and Tavernier. The Banias of the Surat, they undertook business transactions not by words, but by means of fingers. All sales took place in complete silence without anyone speaking. The Banias instructed each other with fingers covered under a piece of cloth and fixing the prices of the goods concealed from others. Moreover, the port city of Surat serves an excellent example for the connected histories of Asia and Europe and the social, economic, and political fortunes of a broad variety of contexts and the actors, particularly the merchants that circulated in between. Surat witnessed Portuguese and their attempt to dominate the Indian Ocean ports, the simultaneous Ottoman arrival and their dispersal across the port, and the Mughal conquest of Gujarat, including Surat, all against the background of more enduring Persianate and broader Indian Ocean circulations through the port. I'll give example of a particular source that is known as Vigyapti Patra. This is specific to the Jain community. Basically, Vigyapti Patra is a long written scroll, and sometimes it also carries pictures drawn into it. These scrolls were the letters of solicitation that were written by the lay Jain community inviting their spiritual preceptor to spend the 4 months of rainy season Paryushan Parv within their vicinity. These Vigyapti Patra, which were picturesque, gives a plentiful idea, windows into the social as well as the commercial world of the times. There are few Vigyapti Pats that are still there in the public domain. So a Vigyapti Patra from early 17th century Surat, it doesn't have a date on its visible portion, but the last picture in this scroll shows a British flag on a ship without the cross of St. Andrews on it. The concept of caravanserais and the concept of trading center practically goes together. The caravanserai were fortified commercial staging posts linking the major trading commercial nodes. Under the Mughals, Babur started in 1528 and Akbar systematically developed it in 16th century. By the early 17th century, the caravanserai extended along the length of the Grand Trunk Road linking Agra and Delhi with Punjab and continued over the mountains of central Afghanistan to bulk sorry, in the far north. The rise of the trade also linked with the mushrooming of sarais in Delhi. In pre-modern times, the transport were slow and roads were risky, so one had to find rest place before the dusk descended. One probably wanted to have food which their community allowed. So these sarais were in the immediate vicinity of the city. And if the city gates were closed in the evening and if the person failed to reach to the contact person, then they could have stayed in the sarai in the close proximity. Arab Ki Sarai in Humayun Tomb complex initially was meant for the mansions engaged in the construction of the tomb, but later it emerged as a significant arcade where the visiting merchants from Armenia, Persia, and other Central Asia and even Kashmir met with the merchants of the city. Movement of goods also facilitated by the growth of financial system, which permitted easy transmission of money from one part of the country to another. This was done through the use of hundis. The hundi was a letter of credit payable after a period of time at a discount. The hundis were often included insurance, which was charged at different rates on the basis of the value of the goods, destination, means of transportation, etc. The sarafs, who specialized in changing money, also specialized in dealing with hundis. In the process, they also acted as private bank. They kept money in deposit from the nobles and also lent it to the traders. By means of hundis, they created credit, which supplemented the money in circulation and financed commerce, particularly the long distance and international trade. Since the merchant could cash his hundi at a point of his destination after he had sold his goods, it also reduced the risk of being robbed of cash, especially when the rich traders such as Virji Vora set up agency houses in different parts of India, including Burhanpur, Golconda, and Agra, and in Malabar, and also in West Asia in the port towns of Persian Gulf, Red Sea, and Southeast Asia. So brisk was the use of hundis that in Ahmedabad, market merchants made their payments or adjusted their obligations entirely through hundis. The commercial ethos and the financial skills of the Bania and the Jain merchants in particular show them to be at part with any other mercantile community or organization of the period. The numerical presence in the numerical presence of these merchants in thousands in Iran and Turan should first of all be sufficient to blow any antiquated notions about the willingness of the members of Bania and Jain mercantile caste to trade beyond the boundaries of Hindustan, which were not solely defined by the black waters of Indian Ocean. Not only were Bania and Jain merchants free from such religious conjunctions, but Marwadis in particular practiced a type of commercial piety which featured reverence shown to the tools of their trade as household incarnations of Hindu deities, say for example, pen, inks, and most importantly, the account books. The Banias were also the most praised and denigrated of the city's people. They were generally described as very intelligent, polite in their address, obsequious in their manner, simple in their living, industrious in their work, but single-minded in their pursuit of wealth. However, the fact that the business behavior of the merchants in India was at variance with the essence of their faith indicate that commercial practices did not find sanction in Hinduism and or in Jainism. The ruthless business practices of Jain merchants like Virji Vora, Shantidas Jori, Jagat Seths, and Hindu banker Malaya would find little support in their religious values. The European travelers like Tavernier has testified the cunning of the Indian merchants that were as shrewd as devil and were not inferior in any respect to their Western counterparts, including the Jews. There was a substantial difference between the formal expression of ideas as contained in the scriptures and the empirical practices of these merchants. There is evidence to establish mercantile families' engagement in everyday socio-economic life of medieval India. Muldas, grandfather of Banarsidas, was well educated, having studied both Hindi and Persian. He became the Modi of a Mughal chief serving Humayun. Muldas served this chief in his Jagir in Narwar in Marwa. Having his master's trust, he also conducted a profitable business of money lending on his behalf. In the absence of his father, Banarsidas tried to earn some money by selling cowries. The medieval merchants changed their socio-religious roles according to their commercial requirements as well. Before the rise of the Bhatiyas and the Lohanas as rival socio-religious business castes, following the emergence of the Pushti Margi Vaishnavism in late 16th century, the Jains virtually dominated the Indian business world, bearing the Muslim mercantile communities. The ability of the Indians to use capital from trade for money lending enabled them to become bankers in an Iranian society that possessed no formal banking institutions. French traveler Yon Chardin believed that the Indian merchants had competitive advantage over Iran. He believed that Hindu Jain merchants were not constrained by religious prohibitions on profit or usury. He noted that some Iranian merchants traveled to India, but still argued that Iranians had not a genius naturally bent of traffic. Merchants from Mughal India who traded in Safavid who traded with Safavid Iran or Uzbek Turan operated within a broadly similar commercial and linguistic environment. Indo-Muslim merchants particularly were able to travel and conduct business almost as comfortably in Iran and Turan as they could within the Mughal Empire. Virtually all of them knew Persian, which was the most widely used administrative and cultural language throughout the entire region. Most substantial non-Muslim merchants also knew Persian, a language that gradually became established as, as one of the administrative cultural language throughout the region. This Persian language that gradually became one of the principal spoken and written language of the Punjab during the Mughal rule. Those merchants dealing directly with the court or its administrative apparatus absorbed the aspects of the Mughal courtly culture as well. At least two members of the larger Khatri caste group dominated commerce in many parts of the Punjab and northwestern India, became high-level Mughal officials, and one of them was thoroughly absorbed in the Indo-Persian literary culture. One of them happened to be Todarmal, who was the chief revenue officer of Emperor Akbar, and the lesser known is Kishan Chand, with a pen name Ikhlas Khan, who served under the last great Mughal emperor Aurangzeb and his successors. He wrote a Persian biography of Emperor Farrukh Shah and also wrote a biographical dictionary of the Mughal poets. Therefore, in linguistic terms, at least the Khatris and other non-Muslim Indian merchants could extend their commercial operations to Iran and Turan almost as easily as any Muslim merchants. In the 17th century, the presence of what has been termed as portfolio capitalists, whose diverse interests, included revenue farming, internal and external trade, banking and money lending, control over mines, military functions, shows an orientation towards profit and power that both demonstrated and facilitated the progress of economy in directions that were fairly irresistible. South Indian Nattu Kottai Chettiars, along with Virji Vora, Shantidas Johari, or Hiranand Mukim of Agra, had all the characteristics of portfolio capitalists. Mughal chronicler Anandram Mukhlis wrote that trade is many times better than nobility. Nobility makes one subject, while in trade one leads the life of a ruler. His observation is a useful reminder of the symbiotic relationship between the Mughal nobles and the merchants. No doubt, the state's share in the agricultural surplus was far greater than the tax on the trade. However, as commerce expanded, the rulers as well as the nobles began to look upon trade as supplementary source of income. This type of an approach had mixed impact. Both rulers and nobles holding administrative charges tried to distort trade for their personal profit. Thus, in 1663, Shah Jahan gave Shah Jahan gave to a Gujarati Baniya, Mohandas Thanda, the sole rights to buy indigo grown in the kingdom. The object was to raise the price of indigo for Dutch and English. But somehow the scheme failed after a year because of the refusal of the Dutch and English to buy except at their own prices. Some Mughal nobles attempted to monopolize trade in their areas in order to sell more profitably to other traders. Thus, Prince Azim Sham declared the entire import trade of Bengal as his monopoly, calling it Sauda e Amo Khas. However, such practices were frowned upon. The practices of rulers, members of royal family, and even some leading nobles having their own ships, which made regular voyages to the Red Sea ports and to Southeast Asia, was more common during this period. Thus, Jahangir, Noor Jahan, Prince Khurram had ships which plied between Surat and Red Sea ports. These trading activities cannot be considered harmful to trade. They created additional carrying capacity, which also helped the Indian traders. The traders in every major city were generally organized on religious cum caste basis. Thus, at Surat, the Jains had their own organization headed by a major Sheth. Likewise, the Baniyas and Muslims were also organized. These organizations constantly interacted with the local port administration and also had access to the political power at the provincial level and at the highest central level as well. They peddled influence and played politics with the various organs of the government. Merchants also employed wakils or agents in the courts of the emperors and powerful princes, through whom representations were made to redress grievances or to make complaints. Thus, in 1616 to 1619, the Indian merchants first persuaded emperor not to allow English ships to Mokha, but when the English blockaded the Surat, the Surat merchants were the first to make representation to the emperor to resolve the issue. In general, neither the Mughals nor the rulers of Bijapur and Golconda believed in administrative trade, though silk was a royal monopoly in Persia under Shah Abbas. The Mughal emperors and lower authorities shared a positive rapport with the merchants and the rulers, and subjects reciprocated the cordial gestures. But the transition of power in Mughal royalty was a major cause of disturbance of law and order, which became a major threat to trade and commerce. Banarsidas mentions in Ardhakathanak, Bipada Uday Bhai is beach, Pur Hakim Nawab Kilich. How the merchants of Jaunpur were brutally treated by the city governor Nawab Kilij Khan. Banarsi narrates another account of persecution of merchants and tradesmen of Banaras and Jaunpur that was meted out by the noble Aga Noor in 1618. The law and order situation was such that even respectable merchants could be suspected of being thugs by the law enforcing authorities. The Mughal state was not financially self-supporting, or at least not so in the local ties, but depended largely on the credit and banking networks of the merchants. For their services, the state was constrained to accord them high status and offices as well. In the Mughal Farmans issued to Shanti Das, he was recognized as a royal jeweler and given the title of the most excellent merchant, Zubdat ul Tujjar. Shanti Das was a mercantile leader of Ahmedabad who carried immense clout even without having any formal authority. After coronation of Aurangzeb as emperor, the Farman issued in favor of Shanti Das acknowledged his stature as the leader of the merchant community of Ahmedabad. As per the Farman, Shanti Das was expected to move from imperial capital to Ahmedabad and use his goodwill to satiate the prevailing anxiety among the urban community over there. The imperial authority further expected of Shantidas that he would make the imperial subjects believe about the benevolence and justness of the new administration, as well as its concern for the subjects. Thus, here, the social standing of Shantidas was becoming an agency to mediate between the anxious subjects and the new imperial authority seeking legitimacy. In return, or this capitalization of his goodwill, the Farman also took care of the personal interest of Shantidas, old servant of the court, by ordering all present and future administrators, mutasaddis of Ahmedabad, to help him in his financial matters. Shantidas was also having his overseas trade. He was influential enough to pressurize in 1618 the Subedar of Ahmedabad, Itmaduddaulah, and his son Asaf Khan to hold an assembly of merchants and officials in presence of Sir Thomas Roe to check the European piracy on the Indian Ocean. But the merchants were not mute spectators to the atrocities inflicted on them and resisted such attempts. The merchants' form of resistance differed in its form, as they happened to be non-violent. When Kilich Khan unleashed the reign of terror on merchants of Jaunpur, the merchants resorted to take flight. Khadak Sen, father of Banarsi Das, also escaped along with his family. The merchants resorted to flight and hartals as methods of their protest in order to protect their interest and to reinforce the normative limits to the self-indulgence of the custom officials, and through their bloodless resistance, the merchants gained the power of negotiation. Such forms of resistance were political techniques developed by petty traders and shopkeepers. In 1732, merchants of Surat, including Ahmad Chalabi, Abdur Rahman, and Mahajan of Surat, brought the trade of Surat to a standstill till their demands were met with. But it is essential to remember that even in such initiatives, when the merchants engaged in collective action against the oppression by the noblemen, the traders remained subordinated to the Mughal authority. One should also take note of the fact that even people like Shanti Das and Virji Vora, who enjoyed some power and influence, could be harassed by the local officials. At the most, through such resistance, the merchants sought to have alternative patrons among the ruling groups rather than rejecting the Mughal authority. Another aspect that I would just briefly like to mention here is about consideration about the relationship between the merchants and cosmopolitanism, indigenous homegrown cosmopolitanism of medieval Indian merchants in their individual endeavors. In spite of their goal of profiteering, the merchants lived and worked in an environment that was known, managed, and mundane, and interacted with other people. The merchants shared an intricate, intimate relationship with the society that was based on their struggles to define and shape their own identity and to exert social, political, and most importantly, religious power over the region they inhabited. These merchants created a social capital in which their influence and religious identity were inscribed on the members of the community. We have examples even from the earlier period. Say, under Chalukyas, there was a great merchant by the name of Vastupal, who traded with the Red Sea, with Jeddah, Muscat, Aden, Zanzibar. And he also happened to be in charge of administering the port of Cambe, which was known as Istambhatirth at that time. Vastupal ordered for the construction of a mosque for his Arab settlers at Cambe. Take another example of the previous centuries from the region of Kutch, Jagadu Shah, 13th century. He regularly traded with Uttam Ardhapur, that is the port of Eden. And as a result of his trade with Eden, he was able to amass Muslim wealth, Malich Lakshmi. And through that wealth, he built a beautiful Khilmi Masjid in the region of Bhadreshwar. Vastupal, Jagadu Shah, both were Jains. They were devout Jains, right? And they had no reason to construct mosques to favor their rivals. But they went on doing so shows a social urge to accommodate even the non-commercial interest of their trading rivals. Another example, there was a port near Bhavnagar. It was known as the Ghogha. This Ghogha, there is a Vigyapti Patra again, which is known as the Ghogha Vigyapti Patra. It refers to the port of Ghogha as Ghanung Ghogha Sundar Bandira. That is the beautiful Ghogha port, which thrived during the time of this Vigyapti. Many ships were using this port due to the transit facilities and the prosperous trade activities which were carried on here. This Vigyapti popularly claimed that even the brides from Ceylon, they were attracted to the bridegrooms from here. Lanka ki ladi, Ghogha ka var, owing, indicating towards the prosperity of the Ghogha port. At times, social intermingling could be a compulsion of political and economic circumstances. Political culture. The Mughals Indian merchants portfolio, sorry, they were not limited to the economic networking and financial transactions only. Rather, their portfolios were mobile, circulatory, and multifarious. The merchants did not normally live in insulated commercial world only. They personally interacted with the Muslim nobility and royalty, European Christian traders, and people of other followings. In the larger context, these congenial bonds symbolize the ethos of cosmopolitan culture as a routine feature of the medieval landscape. The network character of the medieval merchants organization stressed across the fixed or fluid, closed or porous boundaries of cultures, societies, and states. The commercial landscape of the early modern merchants was such that they were interacting with the Mughals, the Portuguese, the Dutch, and later with the East India Company, which altogether provided in different ways fertile ground for the cosmopolitan projects. And the medieval commercial world was such that strangers from different parts of the world could meet and interact. In all these actions of the merchants, one can see cosmopolitanism developing a sort of vocabulary of early modern communities who frequently migrated to avail new opportunities, thus adjusting to new spaces, cultures, and habitats. A 17th century Jain poem, Digvijay Mahakavyam, refers to the spread of Jain throughout the Gangetic plains. Frequent pilgrimages by different religious communities also gave them opportunities to interact and intermingle with people of other cultures and communities. Certainly, the political authority in the capital cities enforced interaction between different people from different religious, ethnic, and linguistic groups. However, as Sanjay Subramaniam argues, a cosmopolitan environment could be created in an urban environment where civic life is driven by commerce. Sanjay Subramaniam's work on Surat gives a range of sources attesting to the cosmopolitan character of the city. Surat emerges as an alternate space of great mixing, where many languages, people, and culture came together, a voluntary manifestation. Here, I specifically mention Jain sources strengthening this argument. Being a commercial hub, Surat was inhabited by many Jain merchants who actively participated in the overseas commerce and the civic life of Surat. The Sanskrit poem Indu Dutam, written by a Jain monk Vinay Vijay, gives a vivid description of the city of Surat. Indudutam describes the various Jain shrines, the endowments of the Jain laity, as well as the crowds of the sadhus and the sadhvis and their supporters vying with each other in learning, knowledge production, scholarship, and philanthropic liberality. It refers to the sea harbor of Surat, filled with ships under the flags of various nations and gardens, parks, and orchards, city full of various types of merchants, and the landmark of the city, the Gopi Talab. The example of Jain merchants like Virji Vora, Shantidas Johari of Ahmedabad, and Banarsidas of Jaunpur clearly indicates that they helped in developing a culture of engagement with others and ethos of public work for civic societies of their times. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Am I audible? I hope I
Yep,
am.
yes, you are.
Thank you so much, sir, for that wonderfully engaging and amazing lecture that you presented on Jain merchants and the relation that they shared with the state in Mughal India. We have many questions for you in the chat, and I'll read those out for you.
Right.
And
Please go ahead.
so the first question is by Sumit Agarwal. I'm not sure if we can call that a question, but it's more like a query of sorts. But he wants to know more about the Jain and Banya relationship in trading. You talked about Banya and Jain traders separately, but what was their relation in trading?
See, as I already mentioned, within this larger ambit of the Banyas, you have the subcaste, and these subcaste they intermingled quite well. For example, I just said Khadak Sen, father of Banarsi Das, he was having his relationship with Dharam Das. Similarly, this fellow Banarsi Das, he was also enjoined in trading businesses with other Banya members of the Vaishnav communities as well as. So that way, intermingling, there was no stopping to that intermingling. Even if we take the cases of the bigger merchants, say Hiranand Mukim, Virji Vora, or Shantidas Johari, they all were intermingling with the members of the Banya community from other subcastes as well as.
Yes. We know all about Jain merchants as traders, but were there any Jain merchants known for their contribution or the patronage for art and architecture at that
Oh
time?
yeah, certainly. Certainly. Why? See, Ishan, the point is we have a limited time frame for this lecture, right? Or for any of the lectures, we have to have some time frame. There is so much that one could talk about the merchants. See, my view of merchants is very different. I don't see and this is what I always I talk, I discuss, and I engage with my students, that one should not see the merchants within the narrow economic, the technical economic terms only. We need to look at merchants as actors in the larger historical processes in which they had a very distinct and a very distinct, direct, and definite contributions towards not only the polity but also in the sense of culture. They were the cultural connoisseurs. Let's say, for example, Shantidas Johari. He is credited with building of the Chintamani Parshnath temple. This is only just one example that I am giving. He built many other such temples, right? And why referring? Because this temple was desecrated by Aurangzeb when he was when he was governor of Ahmedabad. But on orders of Shah Jahan, that temple was still restored. So these Jain merchants, they not only what you call got engaged in the construction of the Jain temples, but they were also very well involved in the works of charity, digging, getting the wells dug anywhere. I refer to Jagadusha, who got built a mosque. He also got built a Shiva temple for his friend. Apart from it, the Jain merchants were very active participant in the literary culture of that time. One particular example of it that I would relate with you is I refer to the Jain source Vigyapti Patra, right? See, if one looks at the whole process of the making, production, and circulation of Vigyapti Patra, it required a lot of resources into it. Because, see, first of all, you require good quality paper. Then you require ink that goes made up of gold, of silver, and other aspects of it. Then you need to hire scribes to write it, and then you have the artists to paint particular aspects of that particular vicinity of that region. So production of Vigyapti Patra was a very expensive process. These Jain merchants were the sponsors of it. Then you have excellent example of Banarsi Das. Rather than one interested in business or commercial practices, he was more, his flair was more literary, who was engaged in production of lot of Jain literature. Not only this Ardh Kathanak, there are many. To his friend Narottam, he dedicated and wrote one of the manuscripts that's known as uh, uh, just slipping its name, some Nam Mala, something like that, right? He was also a translator who translated many Jain treatises from Sanskrit to Persian, from Prakrit to Sanskrit, and from Sanskrit to Hindi. So you have Jain merchants who actively participated in the cultural world of that time, not only in the commercial and the political, but and also important is that these people were actively engaged in their what you call uh, to the particular sect they belong to, religious sect. They also had their say there. Like, for example, Shantidas Johari, fine. One of the most dominant and prevalent Shwetambar subsect there in the region of Gujarat was Tapagach. But he did not share a good rapport with Tapagach, so he initiated a new subsect by the name of Sagar Gach, which he was able to initiate with his what you call his monk friend.
I think your voice is gone again. You can try joining again, and then I'll be ready with the next question. So there is some technical issue, and Dr. Jain will be back with us very soon. So friends who are watching us, please don't forget to subscribe to the Carvan channel, because now we have shifted our live lectures to YouTube, and we are going to do all our live lectures here on this channel. To get the notification, once you subscribe, there will be a bell icon. Click on that bell icon to get notifications for whenever we go live on YouTube. And for asking questions, the live chat is open throughout the lecture, where you can send in your questions for the speaker. Tomorrow, on 18th of October, we have Professor Irfan Habib, uh, one of the most senior historians in India, Professor Emerit at Aligarh Muslim University. He's going to talk about technology and civilization, the case of India, where he's going to talk about various facets of the technological advancements over the period of time. And I think Dr. Professor Jain is here with us.
Am I audible, Ishan, now?
Yes, yes, sir, you are.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry about this technical glitch, please.
No,
So
I think there's a glitch again. Can't hear you, sir. There's some glitch. There's some glitch. It says you're connecting to audio.
am I audible now, Ishan?
Yes,
Huh?
yes, sir.
I'm so sorry about it. See, what I was saying, take example of Banarsi Das, who
Mm.
throughout his life in a Kathanak, who kept challenging the normativity of the community, of the society, right? He kept challenging the Jain belief system. So you have these merchants who actively engaged and participated through and through, away from all the limit, the narrowness of the economy, right? And here, through such examples of Banarsidas, Shantidas Chauri, or Virji Vora, or Hiranand Mukim, one can also look at the shaping of an individual, right, within the early modern times. They're the great examples, I would say, the shaping of an individual during this period.
So what you say is we should not see them just as economic characters who you have to play some role in economics of the time, but also social beings who are, actively involved in society, in culture, in politics, and as you mentioned, Banarsi Das and Johari and the making of the temples, and also we have examples in Shahjahanabad in Old Delhi where you have many Jain temples.
Exactly.
No,
Yep,
all
you
the
have the Jain temples. Exactly. See, uh, when Shah Jahanabad was being settled by Shah Jahan, he invited one leading Jain family from Hisar, Deep Chand Shah. That family constituted of nearly 16 leading male members into it, and Deep Chand Shah, they were dwellers from Hisar, and it were these who founded, established the Dariba Bazaar, that is known till today for the jewelry that was established by that family. So you have the Jains throughout this period, even in Shah Jahanabad, or for that matter, why say only Jains? You have the Khatris as well as the Multanis who were quite active in the region of Shah Jahanabad, along with other Bania merchants categories.
Yes, sir. Somebody commented, but I think it's a question that were they present in the Deccan Plateau as well? Because he says that if he's not wrong, there were Gujarati and Marwari Banyas and Sonars in Vijayanagar Empire and Qutub Shahi Empire. So were they evidently present in the Deccan Plateau at that time?
See, one of the greatest credibility of this particular Jain community was that it was highly mobile, है ना, highly mobile character. So you would find them not only within the subcontinent but across in Astrakhan. You have references to a whole colony of the Jain Bania merchants up there. So no doubt these Jains were there as well as in the or under the in the Vijayanagar Empire. There were as dwellers. Mostly, most of them were dwellers, right? So you do find these Jain merchants active, not active as some other communities specific to that region, but yes, they were very much present there as well as, right?
Thank you so much,
My
Professor
pleasure,
Jain.
Ishan.
There are some comments. Uh, um, नीरज सेज आपकी क्लास की तरह ये सत्र भी बेहद ज्ञान परक है धन्यवाद सर ही सेज एंड somebody mentions that दक्षिणी राजस्थान में जैन व्यापारियों के द्वारा भव्य मंदिरों का निर्माण करवाया गया है रणकपुर एंड दिल
Ranakpur, Palitana, fine. This famous temple at Mount Abu, the
हम्म
Delwara temples. Again, Vastupal and his brother Tejpal, they were instrumental in the construction of this temple at Mount Abu, the Delwara temples, right? And also they had their say in the construction of the temples at Girnar at Palitana, right? So you have these Jain merchants, as I said, who invested a lot in the construction of the temples throughout the subcontinent. Even in Lahore, they got constructed the Jain temples. Akbar granted land to the Jains of Lahore, where they got constructed the temples. Right,
I think
but more
do a
than this
lecture on
architectural. Pardon?
we should do a lecture on Jain contribution, Jain merchant contribution to art and architecture. It's big, it's a vast topic. I think we must do a
Yeah,
separate.
sometime later on we can certainly have, but more, I would say there was more seriously they made contribution towards towards literature.
Hmm.
one really needs to look into and work into the depth of the literary production that the Jain merchants had not only sponsored, but there were also big Jain merchants who personally produced literature as well as, right? Thank
Mm.
you, Ishan. Thank you very much,
Thank you so
Karwa
much,
team.
Professor Jen, for taking out time to deliver this lecture. And I hope to host you again very soon on Carvan for another
Thank
lecture.
you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And there are some announcements for the viewers. As I said, do follow, do subscribe to Caravan's YouTube channel, because we have shifted our platform from Facebook to YouTube Live, because many of our viewers were not on Facebook and they were finding it hard to find our lectures. So through YouTube Live, we wish to make our lectures more accessible to all our viewers and all our friends who join us on our lectures, and they ask great questions and engage with the scholars. And so do follow the channel, do like the video, do share the video, drop your comments down below. And tomorrow on 18th of October, we have Professor Irfan Habib Saab joining us from Aligarh Muslim University to talk about technology and civilization, the case of India. And after that, on 19th, we have Professor Charu Gupta from University of Delhi joining us to deliver a Carvan lecture. So do join us for these lectures. There are many more sessions coming up. So if you want to get all the notifications on your phone, on your computer, on YouTube, when you follow the Carvan Club, the Carvan YouTube channel, you'll see a bell icon. Click on that bell icon so that all you'll get all the notifications whenever we'll go live. So that was all for this evening. Thank you so much, everybody, for asking such great questions, for participating in this conversation. And it was truly an honor hosting Professor Jain this evening. And we hope to see you all in our future conversations. Thank you so much and have a great evening ahead.